Good afternoon, guys, and welcome back to Mark Anthony's Music Picks. Today is episode 94, and today I'm going to feature an artist that is very well known amongst people from the Philadelphia, New Jersey, New York scene, and that is the old classic duo of John Creamer and Stephane K, also known as Creamer and K. Creamer and K basically formed a duo in the late 90s, I believe in 1998 or 1999. They came together in New York, but before that, John Creamer was actually a Philadelphia guy. He grew up here. And Stephane K, I believe, came from Japan, possibly Tokyo, but I wasn't able to actually figure out which town he was born in. But either way, they came together in some way in New York, possibly at like a party at Sound Factory. I saw on Wikipedia, and I guess combined forces and formed into this basically like production Voltron that they ended up becoming in the early 2000s. I remember Creamer and K tracks being very much associated with like very high levels of quality. When I was first going to Exit, I would hear Creamer and K remixes, a couple of which I'll talk about in this episode, back at Club Exit in 2001. And I just remember feeling very connected to it. I very much like Tribal House. Creamer and K always had very sick percussions, very tight rhythms, a very good sense of taste. I just feel like they had very good taste, and they made music that played into the aesthetics of these big rooms with the big ceilings and the reverb and the darkness and the dinginess of it all. Like Creamer and K tracks were nasty back in the day. So I'm going to go through 4 of them with you today, and then at some point later in the future, I'm not sure when, I'm going to do a part 2 for this episode and come back and hit the rest of their catalog because there's just so much to cover. The first track I want to cover for you today is one that was this was a mislabel that came to me. It initially came to me as Kevin Aviance Alive, John Creamer and Stephane K remix. And that was totally wrong. Kevin Aviance's original mix of Alive is miles away from this. This is actually called Tera Chan. And I got a little bit nerdy on this. If you listen to the MP3 version, which is on YouTube, there's a really cool vocal in the beginning. Right before the track starts, the vocal says, I feel your heart pumping life, right? And it's just kind of like got this grimy vibe to it. And then it segues into the intro for Tera Chan, which is like this really dark, industrial, kind of dark progressive that really fits the bill for, this came out in 2002. It really fits the bill for that vibe. Stephane K was part of Bypath. There was another producer that was with Bypath, and Bypath was the duo that made Paranoise, which was the first record that released on Saw Recordings. Like anybody that's watching this episode, if you love Creamer and K, you probably love Saw too. It's the same vibe. And Stephane K produced that track, which is also very dark, and I like to call it like industrial progressive. And Stephane K also paired up with Satoshi Tomiie as M.A.M.P, which also released the track on Saw called Penetration. It was M.A.M.P Penetration. I think it was the main mix was the one that was pretty dope. Again, like very metallic percussions, and you get that same type of vibe here in Tera Chan. And like I said, this track was mislabeled for a long time, so I originally stumbled onto it. If you remember the old, now defunct dancerecords.com, I just typed in Creamer and K, and I was searching and just sampling through the list, and I got all the way down to the bottom, and I found this, and I was like, wait, that's that mislabeled Kevin Aviance track. Like I knew that the Kevin Aviance was mislabeled back then, but I never knew what the original was. I just wasn't able to track it down. And I found it, and I was very happy to pick this up on Discogs because it's still a cheap record, and I highly recommend this if you love traditional, badass progressive. Next pick for you is probably a really obvious one, but it has to be mentioned. This is the one that I heard at Club Exit. This is Kosheen's Hide You. Big traditional, almost East Coast tribal with the ritualistic dark drum beat that sits in the background, and accompanying the drum beat here, there's just a couple of synth stabs that really just put that like drama feeling in the room. I love this. I feel like this is a track that needs a big room to open up in, so when I heard it at Exit, I was like, yeah, that's definitely hitting the spot. The vocal for this is really nice. It's very recognizable. I'll Hide You. And when I bought this vinyl, I actually just finally got this recently. I was kind of waiting to get a deal on it. There's on the flip side is the original mix, and I was like, I wonder what that is. I never heard the original mix. The original mix for Hide You was actually a drum and bass track. And for somebody that's not really into drum and bass, but like can get into it here and there, just like I mentioned in my last auxiliary episode, it's a really nice track. So I recommend this vinyl if you want to get something, spend like $5-6 and get something that's good on both sides with two different genres. I recommend this. Well, it's also worth noting that because I stumbled onto the original mix of Hide You, I saw that the original album that Hide You came out on, I can't remember the name of it now, but that album is really sought after. I saw people were paying over $100 for the original 2x12, so I have some homework to do. I have to go and check that out myself, but if you haven't heard Hide You yet, or if you don't have this on wax and you're a collector, definitely get this. My third pick for you is one off of the Shinichi label. I haven't talked too much about Shinichi. I feel like the Shinichi catalog, although it's pretty strong, there's less records in it to choose from than its cousin label, which is Yoshitoshi, but this is one of the handful of Shinichi records that I've held on to, and it is by ECVM, and the track is called Circuit Breaker. Circuit Breaker, the Creamer and K main mix is the one that I'm featuring in this episode, would mix well into the last two tracks that I just mentioned for you. It's got that dark, almost like intense industrial progressive feel to it, and I think the reason that it's called Circuit Breaker is because there's some electrostatic type sounds in there that kind of lend itself to the feeling or vibe of high voltage or electricity, if that makes sense. I think that's why it's called Circuit Breaker. For this one, I like to pitch this down a little bit. It's a little bit too fast for me. I like my beats a little bit slower, and this one's probably in the 127 to 128 range at default tempo. So I like to take it down to -4, -5 because I think it draws out the groove a little bit more and just gives it more of like a swing factor. My final pick for you is another one that I got to hear out in New York. Now, I heard this at Exit and Sound Factory on different times that I went. And this is Lula's DJ, The Music, and Me. And you guys know I love Lula tracks. I think her vocals were always so unique and interesting, and they just had this weirdness to them that really that like fed into the weird vibe that people were trying to create in these clubs in New York in the early 2000s. And the DJ, The Music, and Me, she calls it the Holy Trinity, the triangle. She's basically trying to describe the relationship between the dancers, the DJ, and the music, and she does it in very poetic fashion. And that's why I really want to interview Lula, because I just want to find out like where she got all of her inspiration from for these. Creamer and K brought a really nice tribalistic rhythm. If you actually sit and kind of pick apart the elements to this, there's a lot of slick elements that were chosen. There's nothing whack. There's no whack or weak elements in this track. It's just this dirty thumping rhythm with lots of changes and lots of dynamics, even though it's stretched out over a 11 or 12 minute track. The elements come in and out in a way where it just kind of keeps you interesting, and it keeps it interesting and it keeps you on your toes. I also feel like there's almost a touch of micro elements or micro percussions in here that almost preceded the micro house phase that came in 2005 and 2006 that I started to notice. So it's almost like little touches of micro tribal in here, but I absolutely adore the percussion patterns here, and I hope you guys enjoy it.
I celebrate life. I celebrate the DJ music. I move through rhythms. I rise above crowds, falling like beats. I feed my love to the DJ. The DJ offers his soul, feeding each other, eating each other, leaving each other. The DJ, the music, and me. The Holy Trinity, this triangle is life. It's an eternal cycle of frenzy, like a triangle in constant rotation. The DJ, the music, and me. The DJ, the music, and me.
All right, that's all for today's episode, guys. As usual, please comment down below and let me know which Creamer and K tracks out of this episode you like. Please keep in mind that I have another episode coming in the future, so I might cover those in the next episode. Everyone, be safe out there and take care. Peace.